let's talk about my favorite book series. Before we get into talking about Sarah J. Maas and a little bit of my writing journey and how I have become a bit of a magpie and what that means for the writing process, please like and subscribe. And at the end of this video, I hope you have some thoughts that you can share down in the comments, because I would love to debate and discuss all the writing craft things. This is also the first video essay style video that I am doing, and I'm hoping it works. This is an experiment, and I hope you enjoy. What followed changed my life. Essentially, and I recognize that that is not the first book of the series that I have just held up there. However, those are some of my favorite books that I've frequently come back to read, study as a writer, to look at and analyze as kind of inspirations. And I really think that Sarah J. Maas does a lot of setup and foreshadowing for the whole series in those two specifically. But what I really want to talk about is Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass series and something that I like to call magpie-ing. And magpie-ing, for me, is different than plagiarism or thieving because it's slightly different. For me, plagiarism is what I accidentally realized, or I realized that I had accidentally been doing in my book series until about 2-3 years ago. And essentially, I didn't realize that I was writing fan fiction of the Throne of Glass series, Lord of the Rings, and there was another book that I can't remember right now that I was also kind of accidentally plagiarizing. And I didn't even know it, because I was basically writing fan fiction of these stories or something like them in my own world. And my own world wasn't even that original. And I remember I was sitting in church, and I was like in the middle of worship. I was having a rough day. My grandma had just been diagnosed with cancer. So all of my emotions were just haywire all over the place. And all of a sudden, I realize, oh my gosh, it was like the book series that I had been writing, all 7 books or whatever that I had hoped to write, just flashed through my mind. People talk about your life flashing before your eyes. My book flashed before my eyes. I felt like I was going to throw up. I remember crying, bursting into tears. I know that people thought that I was crying over my grandma, and, life, like, depression was really kicking me while I was down, and all those things. And I wish that those had been the things that I was crying over. I had cried over those things earlier in the day. That day, in that moment, I was crying over my book series. Thinking back feels a little pathetic, but, when you pour so much of your life's blood and your soul into this kind of project and then realize I'm accidentally plagiarizing and I didn't even know it. Oh, it was horrible. I almost threw the whole thing out. I remember that was why I wanted to throw up, because I was like, I'm gonna have to throw this out. I'm gonna have to write a new book series, but I have nothing. This was my baby, and at that point, I hadn't had other book ideas. I had been going through a panic of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be a 1-book series author if I get published. And I didn't even think I was really gonna get published. It was brutal. And my friend and I tried to have a bi-weekly dinner together. And she comes over and she's like the C.S. Lewis to my Tolkien. And she comes over, we're making dinner, and I'm prepping food, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to throw out my book series. I have to scrap this thing. And I told her what had happened, and what followed changed my life. She stood up and she grabbed my shoulder and she's like, "Elle, no, do not throw out this book series." Because the 3 years of our friendship at that point, we had been working on our books and being bounce boards for each other. And so she knew so much about my book and had watched it develop from this horrible piece of crap, in my opinion, into this book that had all these threads and symbolism and meaning. And I had big plans for these scenes that were gonna come. And to be honest, I wasn't just plagiarizing the whole of this book series. This book series had left such an impact on me that elements of it were just woven into my book, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even see it. Every once in a while, my friend would be like, "Hey, this is really similar. You might want to I want to check that or something. I would be like, yeah, okay, I gotta find another way of like making it my own. But that just kept happening now and then with not minor things or like enough minor things that it was an issue. And then that day it just flashed before my eyes. Frick, I'm screwed. Who had been pointing these things out to me was like, hey, there's some original stuff in here. Like this is you. This isn't just Sarah J. Maas copy and paste. This is some original work here. Don't throw it out. Take a break. Take some time off from it. Put it aside, put it on the back burner. And she hit me with this what if. Well, maybe it didn't change their lives, but it changed my life forever. And it was, what if you made your book series into a D&D campaign? My book world. And I was like, well, I've thought of doing D&D. I love D&D. Like I'd been watching Critical Role at that point. Like props to Critical Role. Freaking love those. I'm so excited for campaign 4 coming out. Yay. And I thought of DMing. Like everyone told me, like growing up, I was just always telling stories. I was playing pretend all the time, right up until like middle school when it like wasn't socially acceptable anymore. And like we were going into high school, so we had to learn to grow up or whatever. And I was just always imagining these other worlds overlaid over my own. It had always been there lurking in the background. Little did I know that over the course of the next 2 years, I would discover all these people that knew about D&D or played D&D in, my circle. And so me and a gang of 6 of my friends, we played D&D over the course of the campaign, which we did for 3 semesters. And over the summer, between the first and second semester, over the course of this 1.5 years, 2 years-ish, I would slowly develop my world. And the campaign was taking place years before my book world was taking place. I was developing the history of my world and fleshing that out. Their campaign has this cosmic impact, and I had like 3-4 possible endings, and 1 or 2 of them was like the true ending. I knew it wasn't these 3, but I knew it could be these 2 options if either they win or they lose, and either one I could make work. It was, in a parallel world where D&D things were happening, but also I ended up realizing, well, my world and fantasy worlds, they're not this world. They should be more fantastical. They can have more than humans, dwarves, and elves. And I have humans and elves / fae in my world already, but I could have more than that. I could have orcs. I could have, and like not just Tolkien-esque orcs, but maybe D&D-esque orcs. And I could have tieflings. I could have satyrs and fauns and pixies and like winged elves, like fae, or like just fantastical elements that are in traditional fantasy but aren't in like Tolkienian and grimdark like Game of Thrones kind of fantasy, or even like things that aren't in this fantasy. I can include that in my own world. I can take those elements that D&D offers and I can be like, hey, actually some of these things work in my world. And it became a huge inspiration. And my players doing these wild things, I'm like, the consequences of their own actions with killing 6 guards in the like dungeons or like the catacombs of one of the cities in my world has rippling effects that I realized, oh, this would be a really cool element of history that might actually help influence my book and the plot that happens there for my character Lysander. Wild. Sick. Oh, and this could be a way to include dragons that isn't a Sarah J. Maas-esque way of including dragons. This could be a Eliana Types way of including dragons. Sick. I got pretty excited about that. There were all of these things that I kept learning, but all of this to say, my world has been so influenced by my campaign, my friends, other worlds, other things, elements of just reading being like, hey, fantasy worlds can be more fantastical. Let's throw in some floating mountains. Let's have dragons, but have my own history of how the dragons got here. Where did they go? What happened to them? Why, for 1,000 years, have dragons not been seen? And not in just some fantasy like, oh, it's been 1,000 years since inventions happened and these like magical swords were made. Credit to Brennan Lee Mulligan's video. I'll see if I can find it and link it in the description or something. And so I was like, okay, cool. How do I make this work for me? Okay, I have like one or two like calamities that happen in my book world. All right, sweet. That can set people back. That can set magic and engineering back. Well, in my book world, they don't want people to have like magic be gone and vanish from the world. But magic is taboo for world historical reasons, because there were genocides, because there was this power imbalance, because mortals feared the immortal magic users. All of these things are Eliana Types originals inspired by Sarah J. Maas, Tolkien, Game of Thrones, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Critical Role, various other things that I have read or watched, and that is what I call magpie-ing. And being a crow is different, because crows directly steal other nests and make it their own. And credit it like, oh, look at this nest that I made, that I totally made myself. And they call it their own, when it's not their nest. It's another bird's nest. A sparrow, a swallow, owl, whatever. It's another bird's nest. However, magpie-ing is this way of seeing something shiny. Paperclip. Ooh, I like that paperclip. I'm gonna go add it to my own nest. Ooh, bobby pin. I like that. I'm gonna go add it to my own nest. Ooh, magic system that is runic like Arcane. I'm gonna borrow that. Ooh, magic system that has arcane runic magic that's like scientific and mathematical, side by side with this elemental magic that can be accessed through however Melmedarda's magic works. I like this idea of two magic systems operating side by side. I'm gonna magpie that, take it and put it make it a part of my own world somehow, in my own way. Oh, I like the way that the magic system in The Witcher works, of this give and take, this balance, this idea of nothing comes from nothing. I'm gonna magpie that. There's burnout, there's exhaustion. Magic users get exhausted. If their magic comes from themselves, they get exhausted. If the magic system, the magic they use comes from the world, there's gonna be a give and take. All of these things are inspirations. They're not me stealing someone else's work and crediting it as my own. I'm not writing the fan fiction book story that I had been to I guess it's 3 years ago now. Holy crap, it's been a while. I'm not making that and saying that's mine. I'm writing my own project. Project Lightborn. My Five Realms project, whatever I'm calling it at the time. That's my book. That's me. I'm a different person than Sarah J. Maas. I'm going to write a different story. However, this is to say that if you do take someone else's magic system, if you do take someone else's plot, like for a while, I was magpieing, but really I was being a crow, in which I was taking the plot story of Selena, and I didn't even realize that I was making it just a different version of Selena's story, just calling it a different character. I realized that I was just rewriting Aelin and Rowan's romance over with two different characters. I didn't realize that I had effectively a Dorian, Aelin, and Chaol dynamic going on. I have kind of kept that dynamic because I am making it my own. I am giving it its own flavor. I am magpieing that dynamic of a trio that starts and ends the series. I really like that symbolism. I really like that thing of these characters have gone through so much and look at them now. I love that kind of storyline. So I'm keeping that. But because I like that idea and that storyline, that concept, not because I like the Selena, Dorian, and Chaol dynamic. I almost use my own characters' names. Now, I do have to be careful about that and not do too many similar things. Like, I can't just have the Dorian character end up with this, like, dragon rider who is, ancient and badass and a little bit, on the BDSM side of things. I'm not, that would be plagiarism. That would be bordering on crow and raven territory. I need to stay firmly in the magpie territory. All of this to say, you can be inspired by other people's works. It's integral to the creative process. We need to read all the time as writers. We need to be reading constantly, fervently, and like boldly, like almost obsessively, because I love the narrator in this series. Because of the similarities I already have, I can't use the same narrator. I don't think. This could be another one of those, it's actually a magpie thing, but I haven't just figured out if it's actually a crow or raven thing. Either way, cuckoo bird, cuckoo birds actually, invade the nest and kill the other baby birds. Yeah, no, we're not cuckoos. We're not cuckoo birding. We are ravens and not mockingjays. Magpies. We like magpies. We don't want to be crows and ravens. Anyways, back to what I was talking about. It's so important to be reading things that are in our genre that we're writing in, but also things outside of the genre we're writing in. Like, I need to read some more literary fiction. I also really want to read more nonfiction, which is a video for another day, discussing that with a guest video or YouTuber. When we create, it's informed, but it's also coming from so many different places that you can't just say, hey, this is another fill in the blank book, because we do need to be in making original work that isn't AI, isn't fan fiction, although fan fiction has its merits. That's where I got started, and now I'm hoping to be a published author someday with my own works. I think fan fiction is a great place for practicing our writing craft, but then instead of just consuming and perpetuating this cycle of consuming, there needs to be this process of creation as well, which is something that I talked about briefly in another time. I was complimented for making a YouTube channel because I was creating and not just consuming. I think that's so important for more than just YouTube and social media. Be magpies and read and write fervently all the time. And I hope to see your book written on shelves at some point as well.